What? So 2/22/2022, and obviously they will have a demo from
Indeed.
About data tables.
No,
No.
that will probably have next week. But about UI testing.
Right,
UI
again.
testing.
Same
But
thing.
this time in Orchard. That's the new stuff.
Okay. Topics, we have subtheory, so you believe that we'll have so many topics. Right. Let's see, I did a lot of work on that. So we'll see if I have something to say. A lot of work that went nowhere. So many questions. That status is here. Where is status? Here. Orchard 1, nothing new. OrchardCore. OrchardCore from 15, what time? 16. Okay, so hide a new option if they are not authorized to edit. I believe in the widgets. What file is that? List part in the lists instead. Okay, in the list view, the new button is now filtered by authorization. Push all. No accents on the A's. Interesting. Fixing async issue, OrchardCore.Tests. Yep, missing awaits. Missing awaits. Fix search from index name input because the form was not complete. It will not find the index value. Thank you, Jasmin. Fix preview package publishing because the new SDK broke everything. It can't pass through anymore. So sad. Fixes, that's a nice commit message. What is it fixing? Oh, I see it was a dependency issue. I think I remember it was a dependency issue. So this code moved from one component to the other. From infrastructure to another extension method. So you don't need a reference to that anymore. Somebody accepted onto account and is done with the game. So it's like, okay, let's go to the meeting. Remove OrchardCore contents file content definition from blank and let's recipe from file again. So the decision has been made to invalidate the previous decision that was being made, which was made to invalidate the previous decision. And the new decision is to not enable the file content definition, which means the default storage for content type is again the database instead of a file. The goal of having this feature is to be able to push the changes on Git, for instance, but it's an optional feature. Update to mkdocs, the contributor on the list. Isham fixing some text on the titles. Isham adding a new feature to be able to set SMTP proxies because some companies don't allow access directly to SMTP servers. You have to pass through proxies. So now you can define custom settings here. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, the docs were not updated. That's kind of sad. Pretty sure we have some docs for that. We have docs for everything. Yes, so this needs to be updated. proxy host and proxy port on. I will think about it. Hisham, fix null index value for localization set content picker field index and her. Wow. Okay. So ending the case where this thing is not defined, so we can store the null string to know that there is a value, but it's not defined. There is an index, but it's not defined. Okay, good. Questions?
I have a question.
Oh.
About the file with the content definitions. Is there a way to change between database and the file?
Yeah, you enable or you disable the feature.
There's documentation about that as well, by the way. I mean, switching from the database to the file is trivial, but switching from the file to the database, no, sorry, actually, you have to export in either case, but that's celebrated there, yeah. Probably if you just search for content definition, yes, that one.
Yeah, so the best way is always to export your types first, and then we can always import them again after.
Okay, thanks.
Good. More questions? Harder questions? Demos. So what's the need today?
Yes. Well, shall I go first then?
Well, I mean, who is doing it at Lombiq? You?
That would be me.
Okay, go.
All right, just a sec. Need to find the proper screen. Okay. And now you should be able to see my screen. We are talking about.
Can see.
All right, great. We are talking about this particular pull request, which is about a proof of concept. So I've shown here multiple times. That's why Sebastian gets bored as well. The UI testing toolbox of ours, which is, of course, a library about enabling UI testing with Selenium and related libraries in Orchard. And it automates a lot of stuff, chiefly ramping up an Orchard app and handling everything related to that. One of the features there that I've also demoed before is a very simple to use single liner that you can use in any app that checks whether all the built-in most important Orchard features work. Setup, login, logout, saving content items, enabling, disabling features, stuff like that. And now that this and every project of ours is up on NuGet, I figured that, let's try it out in Orchard itself, and let's see whether it works and whether it can be useful. Of course, we have Cypress tests. So this is something with the same goal, not necessarily useful, not necessarily want to add. It's a proof of concept that I wanted to show, and then we can discuss how it looks. That's a spoiler about a failing test. But how it looks in the branch is that we now have a new OrchardCore.Tests.UI project here, which references that UI testing toolbox. It contains a couple of classes for some plumbing. This is this UI test base and setup helpers. Not interesting. I've demoed that before. You can check it out. The main point here is in this test. As you can see, this is a test class or an XUnit test method here, and another one as well, which is a failing test, by the way, just for demonstration. I will get back to that in a bit. And this test here is just running this test basic Orchard features. It tests everything actually with the block recipe, as you can see specified here. It tests everything with the block recipe, so all those basic features I mentioned. Furthermore, it also has some configuration. You may have seen 2 issues in the issue tracker about accessibility issues, web content accessibility issues with a couple of built-in themes we have. There's also one smaller issue with the block theme as well. This configuration is about enabling accessibility checks, but disabling the failing rule. I didn't want to go into fixing that right now. But otherwise, this is the main point. So if we run that, we'll also see it happening. So first it tests the setup, it does a negative test with some invalid input, then a positive test, then it tests login, again negative and positive. It's very fast, so I can't even catch up. But it did test some content item operations, created a page, saved it, checked whether that worked, and turned on the background task feature and off again. In the meantime, it implicitly also checked for browser errors, so anything that goes to the console, JavaScript issues. It also checks for HTML markup validation. It also did HTML markup validation, and it also checked the Orchard logs for any errors. So there weren't any. The test is a success. How this looks like in the CI is like this. This is the result of one of the cases where a test failed, that intentionally failing test that I mentioned. You will get the output in the Windows build. It's a usual .NET test execution, so you get a test summary at the end. In this case, one of the UI tests failed, the details of which you can see in the exception here. And actually, this whole thing is the output of the test. So it details what the test did to arrive at this issue, which refers to one of the elements not existing. It's not existing because I intentionally wanted the test to find an element that doesn't exist to make it quickly fail. This is just a little context though. If you go to summary and check out the artifacts, unfortunately this is a wrong name for it, but later I fixed that. Within that, you will find a whole dump of the application with screenshots, HTML output, the Orchard logs, everything that you may need for troubleshooting. And of course, you can also execute the test from Visual Studio as we have seen. So this is UI testing as usual otherwise. So this is not a very complicated test, but if you want to test other stuff, you would do something like context.click here and do some stuff, or you would check for the existence of elements. You would potentially also go to URLs, go to absolute URLs or relative ones, go to the content item editor, the dashboard, etc., etc. Log in, log out, do what an ordinary user would to test built-in features. The goal here is, I think, exactly the same as with Cypress tests. So it's a high-level integration test, a functional test. It's a different approach, and most notably, it's in C#. So these are tests with XUnit as usual. So I think pretty much that's it. What do you think?
It's good. So this PR only has one test, this one here?
Yes.
Okay. could you make this PR replace Cypress and have the same tests as we have in Cypress, which are not hard, like just testing all the recipes and doing some basic stuff, I believe?
Yes, I think this does something very similar than what the Cypress tests do. So I could at least add
Just set up,
this.
yeah.
This
At least a setup on every recipe, I believe it does.
Yeah.
Another thing we do, but not on every PR, but just we schedule that, we run it manually, is test on all the databases. So is that possible to do that too? As a separate step in the same step that we do in the same GitHub action that has the database integration to run? Because I think the database integration is doing, oh, I don't know what it does. Is it doing Cypress? Probably. Maybe also the unit test. I don't remember. I need to check. Because I think it would be nice to have that, but only if it replaces Cypress completely. Because it's C# and it's XUnit and it's Visual Studio. So the fact that it's in Visual Studio is much easier to test and to debug. Well, I'm not even sure we can debug, right? In this case.
So let me go one by one. We don't support all the database engines yet. There's specific support for SQLite and SQL Server. So using by default, it uses SQLite. Of course, it uses whatever you specify during the setup, which is just the setup screen. But otherwise, to get the full support with snapshots and everything, it's
you don't care.
Sorry?
You don't care about that.
Well, for debugging, it's useful to have. But if you don't want that, then it's just about filling out the setup screen, which is pretty much, well, actually, let me go to the model instead. I wanted to do it in a clever way, but didn't. So filling out the setup screen is about specifying properties on this model pretty much. It's a page class. So the database provider would be here. You can select any built-in ones. There's full support for SQL Server. If you don't care about that, so it's just a smoke test just before the release, for example. Then you can just run this with the database provider change to any of these here. And debugging. You can debug the tests. It depends on what exactly do you want to debug. So this test here is running a full test run, what is built into the UI Testing Toolbox. That means that if you run the test in the debug mode and there is an exception, so at one step an element can't be found or there is a new entry in the Orchard error log, then the exception will come from the UI Testing Toolbox. Since there's source link integration or source link is enabled, if you disable just my code and enable source link, which I think is enabled by default, in Visual Studio, then you can see that exception right where it happens. I don't think that's too much help actually, because the error message and the exception message that you see in the end should explain everything.
So you can't debug Orchard itself because it's out of process, like Cypress, right?
Well, like that. That's an issue indeed.
Yeah, so that's fine. Just wanted to know that. Yeah, so you don't need to look at the code or whatever. Just need to check the error message or maybe to debug the steps that are executed in the UI test to see which test exactly failed. But yeah.
Yes, but it's interesting that you say because one of the things that we have in mind would potentially allow debugging Orchard too. There's this issue which I think we actually talked about here before, using the new .NET 6 Web Application Factory. So currently the test application and the Orchard app are two separate apps, and the test app runs the Orchard app as an executable with the .NET command line or the exe file directly. But with this, there would be actually a hard reference between the two, and I think it would be in the same process.
Good. Yeah, and that's what some of our functional tests do, like the API test. They use something like that, like the Web Application Factory, to do in-process test, and then there is an HTTP client that sends requests. That's what Nick did in the beginning. So, and I believe with Cypress, there was no way to do that. So that's why it's using the CLI to do that. So maybe, yeah, if you can get Web Application Factory working with that, and I don't see why you would not, then that would be even better, because we can then debug Orchard when there is an issue with the functional test.
Yeah, that would be actually very useful. We want to do this after upgrading every project of ours to .NET 6. We wait for the next version of .NET of Orchard Core for that, to drop support for every older framework.
Can you go back to the class that was defining the list of databases and also every input of the setup screen?
Yes. So here it is.
This one. Is it from the PR or is it from your packages?
This is from a package. This is a so-called page class. So that's one approach to UI testing. You can create such a class for every page in the system, which encapsulates part of the UI interactions.
This should be in Orchard. It should not be in your package, because the day we want to change the screen, we can't, because the test will fail because they don't match the version of Orchard.
Yeah, well, if we do this integration, then I presume that this would be in Orchard and our package would actually potentially depend on that.
Or it should not use this class.
Or this can be, of course, just copied over, yes.
Like, just get inputs, set inputs by name, and not use such a class here.
Yep. And so this is just one approach. Having such a page class, you can also do everything by command or by operation, like this.
Yeah.
Retries is about.
And if it's done in one of your helper methods, then it has to be done just once with parameters, and then the parameters will just fill the things, and this way we don't need to change the package to change a page.
So how it is done here, this is just for this one, but this is a convenience method. If you check it out in detail, you can see that we also have separate methods for testing the setup itself, and pretty much this does. Oh, there's actually more indirection. Why is it? Okay, let me open this one. So what this does in the end is that it tests each of these operations or features individually. So if the setup should change, then we don't actually need to run this particular method from the Orchard test itself. We can just run everything else like these and substitute the setup test with something else.
Yeah, too many indirections. Too many indirections outside of the project. That's the issue.
Yeah. But there is also granularity, so you can use.
Sure, but outside of the project, that's the issue. So you can't change the granularity inside the test. So you can't change the feature because the test will fail. That's the issue.
Well,
yeah. So it's a cyclic dependency. Like the test needs the setup screen to be this way, and the setup screen can't be tested because it can't be changed because the test will fail because the test doesn't know about the new setup screen. That's the kind of issues I want to avoid.
Yeah. This here is actually meant more for consumers of Orchard, as there is indeed a kind of a circular dependency already, also in a technical way. But if we want to integrate this into Orchard, this whole thing that we have here can be copied over, and then that piece of code is also owned by Orchard.
Mm-hmm. At least that will unblock.
Yeah.
And then deciding to have these layers is a different discussion.
Yeah. So,
Well,
this was
reused, yeah. Okay, cool.
This was just
yeah. So I think it could replace Cypress if it can replace Cypress. I mean, if all the things within Cypress are implemented there, then that's totally fine. Cypress was the best solution we had at that time. Selenium was not working for us. Too complex to set up, but here, from what you've done, there is nothing to set up. Just pull, build, run test, done.
Yeah, you need Chrome installed on the server. That's
what?
available in
what?
Actions.
What? You need what?
Chrome.
Oh, wait. So it doesn't do that by itself.
Chrome installation, no, but it does select the necessary WebDriver for your Chrome version.
Okay, but you need Chrome on the machine.
Yes.
One sec, let me think. What does Cypress do?
What does WordPress do?
Yeah, Cypress.
Cypress. Cypress, I don't know.
Maybe it's headless. Is it? I'm sure.
This is headless, by the way, by default as well.
It's okay, just
I turn that off, but it can be.
For Cypress, I don't think we have to install anything, or just did it work? Okay, 1 minute. I need to take a call, so talk about it without me. I'm back in 1 minute.
All right. So now we can talk about Sebastian. Anybody else with any remarks or questions by chance? It doesn't seem like so. Well, I will recreate the Cypress test. That should be just the same thing with different recipes, just so we can see how it compares.
I'm back.
Hello again.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I don't know what you were saying.
I was just summarizing the whole thing.
Awesome, thank you.
But otherwise, I have nothing else to say.
Awesome. Well, I will have also to leave early because I have to go because of the previous call, but that's fine. Thank you very much. I will share my screen. I should have 5 more minutes, and I will just mention what I'm doing right now. Where's my screen? Well, what I've been doing this weekend. So here, this was UI testing. In Cypress. We could check if we can also do the same thing as the by parameters to run on different databases. I don't remember if the integration, if the full database matrix runs Cypress or not. I need to check. It's something I've been working on in YesSql is this one. Typing has been showing there were some issues with like 2 million, you also track with 10 million records database for perf on the admin screen, and issues meaning it's taking 1 or 2 seconds to display the list instead of a few milliseconds. So it's not a big issue, but I'm working on improving that. The query that is generated by YesSql is something like that with a distinct at the top, when the index can have multiple results for the same document. This is the case with custom item index. We have all the versions for one document, so we need to do a distinct to load the documents. So we just get one document per, one document instead of all the documents for all the versions. And I've been looking at how to optimize this query by either by default removing the distinct or using group bys, and also trying to find a solution that works in SQLite and PostgreSQL and SQL Server. They all have different requirements when you use group bys and listings. It's crazy. I didn't know about that. And my latest investigation is to actually provide new method in SQL to give hints to the query, to say to the query, hey, you don't need distinct because there is the join is a one-to-one with the index. Or you don't need to check on the type because the index is already doing the type filtering for you. Because, for instance, on content item index, it's only checking for content item, so you don't need to check the document table for this type. So that's the current goal. Also providing some aggregations in the order by, because, for instance, if you have an index that returns 5 documents, 5 indexes, then you might want to order by the max of these values of a column on the index, your documents. So that's something I've been doing, but ideally to make the super big number of records queries faster. So that's very cool. Yeah. That works on every database. That's the crazy thing. So that's what I'm doing. Questions, comments about Sultan's demo, or whatever? Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I need to go. See you next week.